Last week, we covered our latest numbers for the Republican 2024 nomination, and if you recall, we were somewhat dismissive. Ron DeSantis stands head and shoulders above Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, Tim Scott, and Chris Christie. But DeSantis is also trailing Trump by 45 points among Republicans, although he's also trailing among all voters. But today we take a look at Democrats, and Robert Kennedy Jr.'s favorability numbers aren't that bad. He has a 49% favorability rating, 4 points higher than Biden today, but 4 points lower than the last time we asked about Trump. He's about on par with DeSantis, but his favorability rating is 11 points lower. His unfavorability rating is also much lower because he has a 14% not sure rating. For the first time by party, RFK's favorability rating is higher with Democrats than with Republicans. He now has a 54% at least somewhat favorable rating with them, up 1 point from the last time in May, and he's above water by 20 points, which is pretty decent. But Biden's approval is 77% with Democrats today, and only 21% of Democrats disapprove of Joe Biden. But 52% of Republicans have at least a somewhat favorable impression of RFK, though not a very big, very favorable rating. And overall, he's actually down 9 points from early May. His favorability rating is down 8 points among independents as well. I really have no idea what's going on here. It could just be noise, because maybe people's impressions of Kennedy don't really weight out when you apply party weightings. It could also be that before he was perhaps benefiting more from name recognition, and now people are discovering more about his platform. Perhaps he has more work to do to sell Americans, at least Democrats, on what must be some really foreign concepts to them. Again, it's important to point out that Biden is an incumbent president with a 77% approval rating in his own party. The fact that we're talking at all about a primary challenger is pretty atypical. One of the reasons we're talking about it at all is because about 1/3 of the national electorate isn't affiliated with one of the two major parties. Among independents, Joe Biden only has a 37% approval rating today, though Kennedy's only at 40% with independents in today's numbers. Overall, only 31% of voters think it's at least somewhat likely that Kennedy will be the Democrat nominee, and 9% of them say very likely. 57% say not likely. 35% of Democrats say it is likely, which is well below how DeSantis is doing among Republicans, though it does have to be said that Republicans don't officially have an incumbent, so maybe you can't call it apples to apples. 55% of Democrats say it isn't likely that he'll be nominated at this point, but only 31% of them say not at all likely. But seriously, that 31% number should probably be higher if Democrats really were 100% confident in Joe Biden's ability to win. But if his approval rating really is that high today among Democrats, why do they have doubts? Well, only 45% of Democrats actually strongly approve of the job that Joe Biden's doing. And believe it or not, only 65% of them actually think Joe Biden is doing the job of president. 28% of Democrats think that others are calling the shots behind the scenes. A pretty stunning 61% of Democrats think that Joe Biden's age will be a serious issue if he runs again for 2024. And believe it or not, 35% of Democrats think it's at least somewhat likely that Joe Biden committed impeachable offenses since becoming president. Democrats are more likely to think that Kennedy will be nominated, but not much more than Republicans or independents. 31% of Republicans say likely, but only 26% of independents. Here's the chart from last week when we were ripping on how Chris Christie has, as of yet, the least likelihood of all the candidates for whom we've asked of being nominated. Like before, these are sorted by in-party likelihood of nomination, and Kennedy sits in between where DeSantis and Pence sit among Republicans, though at this point he's slightly closer to Pence than to DeSantis. When asked of all voters, he's much closer to Pence than DeSantis. But looking at his favorability ratings, you can see that he's doing really well, better than any candidate except Ron DeSantis among all voters. No doubt held up by how much cross-party support he has from Republicans. Last we checked, DeSantis had a 35% among Democrats, but Kennedy is at 52% with Republicans. But that Republican advantage is compensated for by him, again, not ranking anywhere close to where DeSantis is rated among his own party. But while you're looking at favorability, also check out the not sures. Kennedy is still at 13%, whereas DeSantis is only at 4% among Republicans. With how much earned media he's getting on what's essentially a shoestring budget, it seems pretty likely that Kennedy's going to win a lot of these people over. So what's the takeaway? Among Democrats, Kennedy is doing better than Pence among Republicans, but worse than DeSantis. But the fact that we're talking about his primary challenge at all is abnormal, since there is a pretty well-liked Democrat presidential candidate for 2024. Although maybe the really abnormal part is that the Republicans have a former president as a candidate. one who isn't an incumbent. So Robert Kennedy's candidacy is one to watch. We've previously called it one of the most interesting aspects of this cycle, mostly for how diametrically opposed a lot of his platform is to the modern Democrat orthodoxy. Make sure you like the video, subscribe on YouTube or Rumble, and follow us on Twitter for coverage of this absolutely insane presidential election. Thanks for watching.